Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I'm speaking to you from the verse. Now if you're not sure what the verse is, I encourage you to go to my website at rewritingtheverse.com, and that's where you can find out all about the verse, including updates both written and video. Every single YouTube video is on there, so you can go back and peruse at your leisure. I especially invite you to look at the videos that were done over the last several months connected to portals and ascension points. I have been guided to utilize my past life regression and rewriting abilities to go in and specifically utilize twin flame and divine masculine, divine feminine journey timelines to help lift our vibrations as we go through those various portals. This video is specific to the upcoming new moon in Taurus on April 22nd, 2020. So that's actually a 444 date as well. So 4/22/2020 is a 444. So we've got a new moon mixed in with that energy that's going to make it an extra potent portal. And this video is connected specifically to that date. So I have already completed a past life regression that I did just before recording this, and I'm going to share the details of that with you on this video. The rewrite portion, however, has not been rewritten. I've been given a basic understanding of what needs to change in the timeline, and then how that will unfold exactly, I'm not sure. And so we will do that at the end of this video. I find that it's very powerful to do it live with you here on these videos, and so we will find out together what will be healed and how this will affect the planet together. So, just to acknowledge again, I am in Texas in the United States, and we are currently under a stay-at-home order here. So therefore I am still staying with a friend of mine, so we could be alone together during this time. I have my happy Buddha back there, and my kitty's back there too, sleeping. So she's here as well. And that's why we're once again in a different location this week than a month ago. We are about on a 1 month point of being under stay-at-home order here. So okay, I guess we'll get started, and I always ask up front how far in the past we're looking at in the timeline that's chosen. And they said it's approximately 500 years ago. So we're actually looking at about 1500 AD. And then I was shown very quickly where it was located, and this was going to happen, or did happen, in Rome, Italy. And actually Rome has come up several times in the last few months, so that's a hot spot for transformation right now, considering they have been one of the hardest hit areas, reportedly anyway, for what's going on in the world. This may have something to do with it. There may be a lot of positive transformations happening over there. And let this be another one. Okay? So, the very first image, I see a young woman laying on the floor. And she's laying there with one arm up like this, trying to shield herself from being hit again. And apparently, it was her father that had hit her, knocked her hard enough to knock her on the floor. And he was yelling at her, screaming at her. I could see him like leaning down in her face, just screaming at her that he was going to do what he told her to do. And pretty much after that, he stormed out of the room, slammed the door. And what I saw was well, she was definitely a part of the upper echelon of Rome. Just based on the room alone, it was like a very polished floor, very large bed and draperies, all sorts of things, right? I assume it's her room. And the reason he was so upset was because apparently he had gotten an offer or bid for her, and I wish you could say it was even for a marriage, but it wasn't, for her physically, and she was expected to take a bath and get ready because she was going to be delivered to that man later in the day. This bidding process, I'll go into details. This was news to her as far as what was happening to her that day. Her whole life was built up for that moment. But before I say the details, that's what they showed me, and then they took me. So again, this is a twin flame, divine masculine, divine feminine timeline. She is one of the twins. Then they take me to an image of the man involved with this, the other flame. And I immediately, when I saw what they showed me him, I went, holy mackerel, I'm gonna have to look up the name of that guy from Blue Lagoon. Very old movie from, I think, in 1980. But it's exactly the look that I saw. The real actor's name is Christopher Atkins, and Brooke Shields played the female in that movie. And by the way, I'm going to use those names for them just because I didn't really get a clear name on what their names were back then. And so Christopher and Brooke, that's what I'm going to refer to those two as in this video. But anyway, Christopher Atkins, from that movie, that's exactly what I saw. Young, probably, 19 or so years old, blonde hair, curls, blowing in the breeze, just hunky looking guy, right? He even wore some sort of a white shirt that was really loose and open in the front so you could see his chest kind of thing. I mean, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I saw. So that's our other twin, Christopher, okay? And so they show me more about his story and how they meet, because he is not from Rome, but they have to tell me why he's basically in Rome. So, because he is there. And he basically is royalty, actually. He's like the third son of some king over in France. And so he's a prince, basically. And so being the third son, he's not necessarily the very next in line, but he's got responsibilities. And basically he wanted to have a year to go out and kind of like backpack in Europe kind of idea, just go have fun and experience the world while he can. And because once he takes on a lot of his responsibilities, he won't have the time to do it later. So he and his buddy from childhood, even they're buddies, they end up going together. And this is one of their main stops is Rome. Now they're not actually staying inside the walls of Rome. Like at night they go and they sleep camp by a stream or whatever. But during the day they go in, they experience it. And they're there really just to have fun and enjoy themselves. So this is why he's in the Rome area and why, how they're going to meet. Why they're going to meet, because he's already there for that reason. So, okay. Going back to Brooke, again, that woman on the floor we're referring to as Brooke. As soon as she realizes what's going on, well, actually, let me tell you more about that day, what leads up to that point. Actually, I have to basically tell you about her life that led up to that point, because everything was about that day, and she didn't even realize it. So, apparently, at least in this particular group of Roman citizens, I think they're mostly upper echelon people, apparently at 3 years old, the females, at least, are taken away from their parents. And I really get the loss of the mother is a big part of that loss. Not necessarily, yeah, I guess I could be close to their fathers, but the loss of a mother at that age apparently is very difficult. So they're taken from their mothers, and all the females are basically kept together after that. And I got the word cloistered away, kind of like, kept from the outside world, really. They didn't want them interacting with with boys or men. In fact, other than guards, there were no men, no boys anyway, that they had any contact with during that time, because they were meant to be very pure, stay pure, both physically and in other ways as well, and very much taught about, I think their main deity that they were taught about anyway was Jupiter. And so this is what they were raised in, a very isolated situation. And then my understanding is at 10 years old, there is a, I want to say, culling of the herd, basically, because at 10 years old, they go around and they look at the various girls, and if they didn't meet some whatever beauty standard, those girls that didn't make that had to leave. Now, they were told, all the girls were told, well, that's not a bad thing, because we have this, basically, in Christian terms, it would have been considered like a nunnery. That was about 25 miles north of the city, and that's where all those girls would go. All the ones that didn't quite make the cut would go there, and they could still go on and, you know, worship and be maybe priests, priestesses, or whatever, I don't know. But that they had a place to go, and that's where they went. But for those that were pretty enough, basically, they stayed and continued in that environment, which she had, until their 16th birthday, or until around that time. Not necessarily exactly on their birthday, but when they're approximately 16. What the girls were not really told about happened is what happened that day, which was basically an auction. These girls were not being raised to be, you know, high-level society women, influential in any way. They were actually meant to be breeders. Their sole purpose was to get impregnated by the highest bidders, whoever bought them, basically like cattle. And that was going to be their life for however long they were allowed to live that life. And then who knows after that. The girls weren't told anything about this, and they find out a very difficult lesson that day. Because the day of the auction, well, ultimately, let me just say, the year before, they are allowed to go to kind of like a ball, only there really wasn't like dancing and stuff involved, where they actually got to interact with males, especially young males about, you know, around their age. And there could be a little bit of interaction, a little bit of at least seeing each other. What that was actually putting them on a show. The girls didn't necessarily know what was happening, but it was a way to get them out there seen before the actual auction, so that the men that would later be auctioning on them could actually, you know, have an idea of what they may want to auction on when they got to that day. But this day, it was not proper like it was on those other days. No, this day, the girls were made to walk up on stage naked and be ogled by an audience full of young and old men, absolutely jeering, leering, masturbating, just everything disgusting that you can think of, because that was those were the people that were going to be bidding on them. And in that moment of realization, all of them realized it was all lies. Everything that they'd ever been told was lies. And they were on the auction block. So when her father had come and told her later that day that she had had some very good offers and he had accepted one of the bids, and she needed to go take a bath and get ready because she was about to be delivered to whoever it was, which ultimately, my understanding is one of the, I don't even know if they called them Caesars at that point in time, but whoever the leader was of Rome, one of his sons that actually bid on her, and he was the one that was going to get her. But again, purely as a breeder, she was not meant to be somebody who was going to be out there as a wife kind of scenario. Anyway, it doesn't matter. She didn't even necessarily need to know who it was that bit on her. She was absolutely horrified at what had already happened that day and what was about to happen. So once he left her, she snuck over to a friend of her best friend's room, apparently, and said, I'm sneaking out. There's no way. I'm not doing this. You know, this is crazy, whatever. And the plan was, well, you know, that nunnery type place that they were talking about, like a temple of Jupiter or whatever, 25 miles north of here, we could make that. We could make that before anybody would catch up to us if they even bothered to come after us. Let's go. That's someplace we could go. As females, you know, they were obviously limited in what their options were. And so together they snuck out. And apparently they snuck out a lot. It was apparently fairly easy to sneak out, so they didn't really run into any problems. And off they went. So, this is how Christopher and Brooke meet, because they start to walk along, the girls start to walk along a river, and they hear something, or stream, whatever. They hear something. So they kind of crouch behind some brush, and they're looking, and they hear and see Christopher and his buddy, totally naked, by the way, but swimming in whatever water hole was right there. Swimming, laughing, splashing each other, whatever, you know, just playing around. And the girls are like, I don't even think they talked. They were just like in shock. Probably didn't know what to do. Probably trying to think about how do we go around these guys without being seen, whatever. I mean, there were trees there. They could have probably made their way around. Anyway, they thought they weren't noticed, but the guys had heard some noise in the bushes. So his buddy, who was closest to the shore, was like, hey man, let's see how long I can stay underwater. So he goes underwater, but unbeknownst to the women, he's actually able to crawl out the side and grab a sword and come around behind them. And I get these visuals. Unfortunately, I have to see everything. Maybe not everything, but this one's interesting because he's totally naked. And he's got a sword, and he doesn't know what's there. He figures it's, I don't know, some guy. Who knows what. Anyway, he's ready to kill, really, if that's what's needed. And he's got the sword up when he jumps out naked from behind the tree, and obviously there's two startled females there. And, well, anyway, that's how they meet. And then they show me that they're sitting around their little campfire now, and after a few moments of awkwardness, because, you know, naked isn't always, the natural way to meet people. Anyway, so where are you from? So both sides share. The girls pretty much actually told them exactly what happened that day, and that there's no way they're staying in that kind of situation. So this is where we're going. The guys basically share that they're doing the touristy thing. There's no mention of any royalty connection or anything like that. They're just there seeing the sights, enjoying Rome. But they offer to escort them to where they're going because it's very dangerous. And it's true. It is very dangerous for women to be traveling alone. You know, we'll take you where you want to go. Okay, so they do make an agreement. And that's how they get to know each other. And I can say that there was immediate attraction. Actually, I think all four of them. In fact, I did suspect how quickly the other two involved kind of get connected, that they may also be twin flames. But the main story is about Brooke and Christopher. And there's an instant, well, actually I want to say recognition now, at least chemistry there. They both feel it. He's great with the idea, and she's totally afraid of the idea. Remember, she lived in a very protected environment, and her main male influence was a cruel father who was very emotionally distant and didn't care about her at all. Easily sold her into whoever's arms. So She was extremely suspicious. And even though the other girl was raised in a similar environment, she didn't have the same level of suspicions, I guess, or inhibitions, whatever the case is. By the next day, her friend and Christopher's friend were already getting cozy and cuddly and laughing and very comfortable with each other. And it was a very opposite of what Christopher and Brooke were experiencing over here. They liked each other. It wasn't a matter of liking each other. They talked. They actually intellectually appreciated each other for that reason. And yes, there was a lot of chemistry, but that was not, especially on her part, allowed to blossom, I guess. So it was kept very intellectual and very, like that. So yes, they had a lot of communication, a lot of interaction, and yeah, by the second day, those two friends were definitely physical. They were already crossing into the no more virginity over there category. And her friend actually told her, hey, you got to try this, especially if we do end up going to that place that we're headed to. You probably won't ever have another chance like this again. You've got to try this. And your guy's cute. You need to try this stuff. And she especially said that the touching part of it was especially good. And remember, 3 years old is when these girls got separated from their parents. So any kind of just intimate, loving kind of touch, they hadn't experienced for 13 years. And so that seemed to make a big difference, at least to what the girl was saying. For her, that was especially nice. Let alone the actual sex part, but whatever. So the relationships very quickly developed into these two separate relationships happening in very different ways. So it took a few days. I mean, they weren't in any really big hurry to get there. They could have gotten there very quickly, but they took their time. They stopped several times a day to eat and snack and nap, and at least for one couple, have a lot of sex. But anyway, things didn't really change too much physically for Brooke and Christopher over that time. It was pretty obvious by this point that she wasn't wanting that at least at this point in the relationship. She wasn't interested in that, or I don't know, you could feel the energy, you could feel the attraction, you could feel all of that, but there was this wall of distrust that was there that, he respected. He wasn't going to try to force his way across that. And so it got to the night before they knew they were close enough to actually make it to whatever place they were going to. And it was like a last opportunity for if there was going to be any kind of physical connection between them. He knew it was probably going to need to be them, and, well, them, right? Anyway, but he just didn't see any crack in that wall. So by the next day, when they were all talking around the campfire and about ready to leave for the last few miles, her friend said she wasn't going to go to that temple anymore, that she was going to stay with this guy, and they were, whether or not they were going to last forever, who knows, but it was, I don't know, sounded a lot better than whatever was waiting for them over there, and she really encouraged her friend to stay with them. Let's all just go on and do whatever. And Christopher made that offer too. He invited her to stay with them, and, whatever. But Brooke was still very much, it's hard to say. She was just very, I guess, traditional in a lot of ways. And she really believed in the Jupiter doctrine and whatever. And it was about safety. Ultimately, what I got was that it felt like the safest option. As long as they got in there, they weren't going to be turned away. It's a safe place, no men in there for one thing. And just, it's someplace they knew they could stay. But these guys, it's a risk. staying with these guys. You know, one, what if they turn out, okay, so it's been a few days, but what if this guy really is a jerk like everybody else, you know? Even though he's cute, I really like him in a lot of ways, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? Or what if I'm right? Whatever. And it was a risk she still wasn't willing to take. So they continue to walk along the river, knowing that they're getting in the area, and they ran across a cottage, and there was a woman outside kind of doing laundry or something, and they all four walked up, and actually it was Brooke that went up and asked her about where this this temple thing was, that she wanted to join it, and that's what she was. Could she tell them where that was at? And like, oh yes, oh, it's not too far from here. No, but the woman seemed to know all about it. In fact, the fact that men were not allowed anywhere near it would require that she be the one to take her to the place herself, which she would gladly do. But no, the men would not be able to go. They'd have to leave. Well, obviously they couldn't really stay there either, but she would take her on. In fact, she opened a door, and there were 3 other young women that had been in that scenario with them that had escaped as well for the same reason and had come up there with the same intention. And they had only waited a little bit just to see if anybody else would show up. And the woman kept asking her friend, well, you came here for that same reason, right? Oh yeah, but I changed my mind. I'm going to stick with these guys or whatever. And actually the woman was very, say, persuasive, or trying to get the young girl to change her mind about that and to continue on to the temple. That is an amazing opportunity that a young woman should not pass up, whatever. She was actually putting a lot of pressure on her to do that. But ultimately her friend stuck to her guns and said, no, I'm going with these guys. So reluctantly the woman did finally say, okay, yeah, that's what you want. And then she said, well, at some point that afternoon, ultimately she said, well, I don't expect anybody else to probably show up after this point, so her and including Brooke, the 4 that wanted to go, she was going to take them. So Brooke says her goodbyes to her friend and says her goodbyes to Christopher. And there's that moment, that last time that they see each other, like, is this is it, huh? At least on his part. He definitely didn't want her to go. But she's strong-willed, and she'd already made up her mind. And so they, the woman and the 4 young girls, walk on to wherever, and he and his friend and the girl, they go on a different direction. And I can tell you, because this is the last time Brooke and Christopher see each other, that Christopher does not ever really find anybody that ever makes him think that she may not have been the one. Because there's always these what ifs in his head the rest of his life. But so the woman takes Brooke and the other 3 girls, and she's, I don't know exactly what she's saying, but giving them some spiel about, oh, you're gonna love it, you're gonna love it. And they turn the corner, and there are these Roman soldiers. And the girls are easily corralled by them. And for every girl, the woman gets 2 gold coins. Apparently, this happens fairly frequently, especially while following these auctions. They have escapees, and one of the reasons they tell them so much about this temple that does not exist. And so if they do try to escape, a lot of them will choose to come there, and then they get caught. And so if you're wondering what happens to those girls they said at 10 years old, they actually get killed. There's no Jupiter temple that they go to. If you are raised to be a breeder and you do not hit the marks along the way, you're killed off. Rome has no use for dead weight. So, Brooke ends up having to go back. She ends up with the person that actually, bid for her. She and all the girls actually are extremely punished for the attempt to leave, but they still end up having to be the breeders that they were raised to be. And what I'm being told is, yeah, Brooke had a lot of what ifs after that too. Not that she couldn't really convince herself that yes, she would have been happy with Christopher, but there's always that what if he was genuine? What if that really was who he was? What if not all the men out there are pigs? Well, she never found that out in that lifetime. So that's how the first version ends. There was an opportunity, but it was missed. So this is where, once I get the highlights off of a timeline, I will ask my guides or whatever other entities may be helping where the best place to intervene would be. And I was shown that we needed to go back to that last night while they were laying down for the last time. Is that last opportunity, if there was going to be any intimacy, at least physical, for either couple, that was going to be it. And believe me, the other two, they were busy all night. But then again, I think she had already pretty much figured she probably wasn't going to go to that temple after all. So they were enjoying themselves. But for Christopher and Brooke, they kind of just laid there near each other like they had, but there was no touching. So the way I see it, the firelight is the only real light that they have, and he can't really see her face. She's facing him, but he can't really see her face. And it looks like she's asleep. There's no movement, whatever. I think it's pretty late. And what I see is that she has a hand kind of laying out on the ground, just laying there near her. I mean, not stretched out too far, but it's still laying out on the ground as she sleeps. And that night, in the first version too, he had wanted to reach out and hold her hand. It took everything in him not to, apparently, to reach out and hold her hand that night. He was trying to be respectful of her wishes, basically. Wanted her to show the first move or whatever that she was comfortable. Whatever. That never came in that first version. But here we are again. He's laying there. He's looking at her. Again, can't really see her face too well with the light. But her hand's on the ground. And I'm trying to see if I can get exactly what's going on in his head, because this is what's going to be different. holding her hand is going to change it. This is what I'm being told. Like I said, he debated quite a bit that night whether or not to hold her hand, and obviously in the first one he didn't. But in this one, I don't know if we need to understand his thought process. He finally just said, well, what's the worst that could happen? She'll pull it away, or she'll tell me no, or she'll say something. So he slowly reaches his hand out and just kind of puts it on hers. Hoping not to, if she is asleep, hoping that she won't wake up, actually. But he doesn't. His heart is pounding in his chest, right? And he does it. She is awake, by the way. Can't really see her eyes. I don't even know if her eyes were open when he first did it, but they're open now. And for a split second, there was that moment of, how dare he? Actually, it was one of her first thoughts, how dare he? But she didn't pull her hand away. Not immediately. What I'm getting is the touch of his hand. I want to say electrified her, but that's kind of the word that, in a good way. Not like shocked her physically, but there was something about it that was so perfect. She didn't want to pull her hand away. In fact, I'm getting the word warmth even. Just wasn't just the physical touch. Clearly she had feelings for him. She did. He knew it. She knew it. She didn't want to pull her hand away. She had the choice to. It certainly wasn't like pinning it to the ground. It was very lightly hand on hand, but something about that warmth was melting something in her heart. She might have even closed it off in childhood. Maybe even when they were taken from their mothers. I'm not sure, but something. What I'm being shown and told is that it was not lust. That she knew that it was a deeper connection that he was feeling for her. I think she had, up until that point, figured it was probably just lust or, sex and typical guy kind of thing. He's just maybe more charming than most, but no, she could feel it. She could feel it. And when she didn't pull her hand away, in fact, I saw that she actually gripped his hand in an, I guess, inviting way. He knew that, well, she was okay with that. And eventually, they actually did cuddle. No sex. They did cuddle that night. All night. After that. So the next day, when he asks her not to leave, to come with them, he was able to hold her hand while he said that. She said yes. So I'm just seeing this now. I'm rewriting this, or we're seeing how it's being rewritten right now. It's not formal yet, but that's why I'm having to take a little bit of time here to see how it's unfolding. She could have said no. She could have had whatever resistance, something about that touch, though. melted the wall around her heart. They never made it to that lady's house. They were actually spending most of that morning around the fire saying, okay, where are we going to go? Where do we could, they still had plenty of time of travel, the guys did. Where would we like to see? They ended up going a different direction. And already, there's a smile on Brooke's face. Already, she's leaned up against him. They're holding hands, whatever. But there's a smile a real smile that I don't think she'd ever experienced before in her life. I'm trying to see, do they want us to rewrite this first? Because it's not rewritten yet. I feel like there's something else that we need to either understand or know before we do this. I can just hear her being very comfortable with him now. I mean, it changed everything. Ultimately, she hadn't felt love since she was 3 years old. And it just is, I could see the smile on her face and the ease. I mean, she was so rigid up until that point, right? Especially compared to her friend who was like, yay! No inhibition there whatsoever. But anyway, okay. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this now formally, and then we will see whatever there is to see on the other side of that. Okay, what they're telling me now is, do you see the connection to what's happening today? No touch. No touch. 6 feet between us and the nearest person. Stay away from each other. Don't trust that you're safe around other people. Can you see how that plays in perfectly to right now? We are social beings. Touch, healthy touch, is a very important part of our human development. Without it, we can't really live. And whether you're a child or an adult, it's still important. So now the energy is starting to build. And I'm rewriting that right now. So that's shifting everything back then, 500 years ago. And it's going to be flipping every lifetime that's connected to that, which are many, 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 many lifetimes connected to those two. I can already feel it starting to come into this timeline right now. Just the touch of a hand, genuine love can change everything. Still a lot of energy coming in. I hear her laughing. I hear the whole group laughing. The whole group. Remember, he laughed a lot too in the beginning. I didn't see so much of that in those 3 days they were together. But now they're all laughing and enjoying life. I just looked up and it said 4444. This truly is a 444 portal we're coming up on. And we're already feeling the energy of it today. This is the I think it's the 19th. It's Sunday. The Sunday before, anyway. And we're already in the energy of this. We don't need separation. There's already too much of that on this planet as it is. We need genuine love. We need intimacy to truly thrive on this planet. That's what we need. Healthy touch. There are so many that have either been without healthy touch and or have been touched in unhealthy ways. And they need to heal. This whole planet needs to heal. Trying to see if there's anything else about that timeline that we need to understand. They are going to go back to France, all four of them. And yes, Brooke and Christopher and the other two, they get married. Something, a cause that she really champions that will make a difference. Something about mothers. What is it? Sorry, when I do these live, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to unfold, and sometimes it takes a little bit to download whatever's happening. Okay, I feel like there's something similar going on in France and most of the more advanced countries back then. Rome and Italy were not the only ones that had like breeder programs going on. Maybe not at that level, but still. I feel like she is championing the stop of that, at least in France. And Christopher is glad to help with that. When the girls first told them that very first day they met about what they were raised in and what they found out that day that they were part of, even he was appalled that something like that could be going on. So he gladly helped with that and got rid of it in their own country. I feel like there's something else about that. Okay. I know we've done some past life regressions in the recent months that we're helping with the human trafficking, as far as helping clear that out. This feels more about the adults, about the mothers, about the women that are being used as breeders. Right now, I'm aware of one of the reasons why this whole planet is on lockdown, It's because it's time to release people. A lot of the child pornography rings, things like that, pedophilia, are being addressed, and they were addressed first. And I'm sure it's still being addressed right now. I'm going to find out a lot of horrible things in the near future about what's happened to the children on this planet. But today, it's about the adult trafficking. It's about, I know there are men being trafficked as well, so I don't want to step over that, but there's a significantly larger amount of women that are being trafficked, and a lot of them are being trafficked for this reason, because they're being used as breeders of some sort. Their whole life, or much of it, was to be used in this way. Or even if it wasn't, even if they were grabbed off the street, whatever the case is, women are being abused, used. I feel like this is right. Shifting things. I want to say it's actually crossing over into domestic violence somehow. So not just about trafficking, unfortunately, there are plenty of relationships out there that are much like that. Just as controlling, just as physically abusive. Something about the divine feminine right now. Okay, I'm getting that Brooke was a good example of how that kind of abuse, lifetime after lifetime especially, will create a soul that just can't really live, or has a lot of challenges around trust and love. And it's time for the divine feminine to break out of that, especially when their divine masculine shows up. Okay. I do feel like this has something to do with the unity of the twin flames as well right now. Yes, this is lifting the divine feminine in general. This is assisting with human trafficking, especially of women, back as far back as 500 years ago. But I feel the biggest energy right now is about how the twin flame energy, the twin flame reunions right now have been blocked on a large scale. I'm not blaming anybody. In fact, if anything, this timeline lets us know exactly why one or both partners can't fully open their hearts. But with the unity of Brooke and Christopher, with those two being connected now, see how free Brooke is to laugh and love. That's what the divine feminine deserves. That's what they have. And that's what they have to look forward to, especially with the divine masculine, whoever that is, the one that could truly love them for who they are, that can be with them in any form and have it be intimate. Unity on all levels. That's what's happening right now. I'm feeling it very powerfully. The intimacy that's been missing between the two is gone. And it just took a genuine touch of love to break that for everybody. This is a template. This is now available to every twin flame couple out there. if they choose it. Yeah. It's time. It's time to bring people back together again. On every level, including physically. The time of keeping people locked away from each other physically on this planet needs to end. So when people come back together now, it's a whole nother level of intimacy and union and love. Wow. Thank you, Brooke and Christopher, and the two buddies that were there with them. Yeah. A lot of energy running through me right now, but I think that was the highlights. If you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Please comment below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I will be doing another short highlights video right after this one, and I will attach the link below that will talk about the major takeaway. And for me, the major takeaway is love, healthy touch, intimacy. Yeah. So until next time, peace and joy.